Hey, welcome to another edition of On Location. As always, not only are they the best in the business, but they're also friends. So without further ado, we're gonna bring it to Joe Calo, who's presently one of the editors over at the Yes Network. But Joe's got a lot of story to share with us. And Mr. Calo, welcome.
Hello, Joe. It's really an honor to be on the show. I'm really happy to talk to you.
Okay.
Learned a lot from you in the past, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more in the future.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so kind. And just so you all know, this is a retake. Joe and I already did this once.
Yeah.
And with two pros at the level we're at, there's still technical problems.
Yeah,
So,
and it was a little too dark, so you couldn't see my film posters in the back. So, Joe said, you know what? We have to see Wolf of Wall Street and all the Marty Scorsese stuff, so we have to do it again.
Joe, let's talk about what you're up to presently. You're an editor over at the Yes Network. You've been there X amount of years. You're going to share that with me. What's your day-to-day life like? What does an editor of a network do? Oh, by the way, 14 Emmys, right?
Yes, 14.
It's my boy right there.
Won a couple weeks ago. We won for best sports interview show, second year in a row. The show
Awesome.
that I edited, the feed one. Yeah, so really proud about that. Really just proud about being a part of Yes as a whole, because I started with them day one. I was one of the first people hired. I definitely was the first editor hired, and I basically came over from working with the Giants half the season and the NBA to working, full time with Yes and growing with this company now for 20 years. And yeah, you brought it up. The way I started, Joe, is when I was with the Giants and with the NBA, I was a producer, strictly a producer. One of the things that really helped me is that I started an online room. And we all know the old tape days is that once something is put down into tape, you're living with it, unless you're going to go back and make drastic changes.
Right,
So
right.
it allowed me to become a producer and get everything ready in my head before I went to an edit room. I timed out every shot because we weren't given a lot of time on the Giant shows back in the day that Joe was the executive producer on. We had to knock out 3 features a day. So I used to time things out in my head and, didn't do it right away. I learned as I went. Joe was very patient with me. But, you learned how to time things out so when you went in the edit room, you were prepared. And then we got introduced to the Avid. So when I went in there, it was a little different because you can move stuff around. You can change things. You don't want to get too spoiled because everybody always has a deadline and a budget. So you don't want to go in there with no plan at all. So I went in there with a plan, but you were able to move things around. And then, I started thinking the word Predator wasn't around yet. But
Hold it.
Yeah.
I got a whole set of questions here.
Oh, okay.
You just went through out of the 9, I think you just ripped 5 of them off.
Just like my wife says, I talk too much. I'm Italian.
No, it's not too much. It's just you're too good. You learn too well because you're actually doing the interview.
Yeah.
Let me back you up a little bit. Let's go back to what do you do during the day?
So typically with the Yes Network, I can work on any project. I can work on promos. I can work on interview shows, which we haven't done since the pandemic, like Center Stage, like the show The Feed that we did. I work on a boxing show. And then most of my stuff is on the Yankees pregame show that airs every night, or the Brooklyn Nets pregame show. And I do a lot of nightly features. And a lot of times I'm asked to do the opening tease to opening day or the playoffs, which is really quick turnaround kind of stuff. So I'm honored that Yes has trusted me now for 20 years to put something in my hands that's basically going to be seen by the whole country. So it still really excites me to do stuff like this. I still sit in a room, I turn out the lights, and I listen for the music, and I make sure the music is there and the hits are there. So everybody at home can watch it with the sound turned down or in a bar, and they're all talking, and they don't even notice when the music hits and everything like that. But Joe warned me of that way back, that when you're in television, people eat meatballs and stuff, and they're watching the TV. They're not paying attention to where music and effects hit. But yeah, so I'll work on mostly Yankee stuff. Now we're doing the Brooklyn Nets, but I'm also a part of a lot of other projects here that come in all the time. We just finished a cooking show with members of The Sopranos, so we're trying to do all different things here. So a lot of the time I do work by myself, though. It wasn't an overnight thing. I had to earn it, but it's been very rewarding.
That's great. That's great. And everything he's telling you is spot on. I mean, he's not making any of that up. He is one of the best storytellers. And again, we're going to go through how he got to where he got to. Joe, do you do any freelance work outside of the, oh, you know what? Hold on a second. For those of you who don't know what the Yes Network is, it's Yankees entertainment and sports. So the Yankees own their own network that they launched pretty much as, what you say, 20 years ago? That's when you started?
20 years ago, yeah. They launched it right after 9/11. So it was a very weird time to launch a network. And George Steinbrenner thought about the idea, and John Filippelli worked with him. And we were the first cable sports network. And now a lot of teams have done it. I mean, most teams have their own network.
Yeah, I was just going to say, pretty much most pro sports now do that.
Yes.
So let's talk about some freelance work. So
Sure.
You were a freelancer. That's
Yes.
how you worked with me, Ferro Productions, when we were doing Giant stuff.
Yes.
That's how you did NBA. So tell me a little bit. Do you still get a chance to get your hands outside of Yes?
Yes, I used to work with NBC Sports, which luckily actually moved in the building next to me about 15 years ago. So, when my second child was born, I knew that, my wife couldn't work anymore. I had to step it up, and I had to do some night work. And, I walked on over to NBC pretty much 3-4 nights a week, and I do a lot of hockey. At the time, they had the hockey. They were the Versus Network. So I used to do things called VOD, Video On Demand, where I used to sit there, watch the 3-hour hockey game of the night, and I used to cut it down to a 10-minute highlight package.
Oof.
And then I would immediately release it to everybody over the web that they can watch it and stuff like that. And,
Were you a hockey fan?
I was a hockey fan, but nothing crazy. I used to like the Rangers, but nothing like a football fanatic like I am now. Even baseball. I like baseball. I love football. Giants will always be number one in my heart. Unfortunately, they give you a lot of agita, but
I just find it difficult. I don't want to interrupt you, but everybody says that. But actually, if you interrupt somebody, you do mean to interrupt them.
Absolutely.
So the reason I'm asking is because cutting sports, like what you said, a 3-hour game down to 10, cutting shows for sports is different than actually cutting the game. So if you're not passionate about the game and you don't know the nuances,
Right.
Who's making that call for you, and how difficult is that?
It could suffer. When I was working over there, and I had some producers that really weren't, up to speed on a lot of the hockey that's going on and current things, so they didn't know coaches and everything. So you had to be a little patient. You always have to respect the person that you're working for. Sometimes they want to hear your input. Sometimes it's their vision. But with sports, a lot of the times with cutting highlights, you kind of know with hockey, it's goals, it's saves, it's fights. They want to see fights. So you kind of know what to stick to, like football, But, one of the great things is when I was with the Giants, Joe, we used to mic a player. So we used to really hear what was going on. Yeah, I mean, it was tremendous because I never would have thought about that side of the game and everything that was going on in the huddles and everything that was being talked about on the sidelines. So, I used to think that I'd go in there and I'd listen to a lot of X's and O's. It really wasn't.
No.
It wasn't, oh, you cover this guy, you cover that guy. Hey, where are you going? I'm just going to tackle somebody, So, sometimes you don't have to know the game. It really helps if you do, especially with what I do with baseball. I put the wrong players up there. It's not good. So, yeah.
One of the things that everybody getting into the business, or even when you're in it, it's a difficult path to decide or to figure out how to move up or out or change or pivot. How did you go from being a pure freelance guy in a seasonal, because you were in sports, so sports are all seasonal, to make that? How did you make that leap, or how did you get that opportunity to go to Yes?
It rarely ever happens. And when I first got in the business, the great thing about the Giants was they taught me a little bit of everything. I learned about camera. I learned about lighting. I learned about producing. Joe saw something in me as a producer that we went with, that, and I loved it. And then I picked up editing, and I really loved editing because I have these thoughts in my head and I'm trying to put together, and I can put it together in my head. Now I could relay it on screen, and I could relay it, and make it look nice, and my vision comes on screen. And then seeing as the business was changing, Joe, they're always looking to save money. So if you're not hiring a producer and an editor, you're hiring one person who's a predator.
Right.
Right there, you're sure they'll pay me a little bit more, but in the end, they're going to save 2 salaries. So it was extremely hard. Like, I love the Giants job, but being freelance, I knew that I was married and I had a baby on the way. You needed those benefits. And Yes came along, and it was nerve-wracking at first, when I joined Yes, because we were getting paid freelance for the first year or two, and we didn't have to deal with Cablevision. So it was a really nervous time for Yes, and I never questioned whether it was the right thing to do because I knew it was going to eventually work because the Yankees were that big at the time, and they had just come off of all these World Series in the 90s. So we were in 2001. So when they offered me, and they promised it for a couple of years, when they finally came to me and said salary with benefits, wow, it was really a great day. It was like relief, you know? And at the same time, I knew I'd be working on something great like the New York Yankees. So I'm telling you, Joe, from day one, I took it and I ran with it. I never looked back. Every feature that I put on the air, I wanted to be an Emmy winner. Every tease that I do, I want it to be an Emmy winner. You know, I got to show my kids that. Even at 50 years old, I want to go to work every day and get better and better and better.
You're such a good... I mean, that's one of the things, and I don't want to go too far off on it, but one of the things I talk to people about all the time, matter of fact, my wife and I had this conversation last night. If you chase money, I've been employing people, I've been working with people since I'm 20, and I'm far from 20 right now. And what I learned after all that time was it's not money. People say that, I'm working my butt and I want to die. I deserve more money. And you give them more money, and then 6 months later, they're right back where they were. Because if you don't have that fire, if you don't have that passion, if you don't love what you're doing, you're going to burn out. You're going to have that, because it's not fulfilling. And money only goes so far, especially when we're not in the money business. We're not Wall Street. We're not bankers. We're creatives. Mm-hmm. So that fire has to stay there. Joe, you said something, and I want to hit on this. Sure. Mastering technical skills, storytelling, or creative vision, which one of those do you say is, or in what order would you say those things make you who you are? Joe Calo, 20 years, editor, Preditor, 14 Emmys, blah, 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 blah.
Storytelling. Always making sure everything you do has a beginning, middle, end, which I was taught by you. And efficiency. Because also I was taught by you, and it's great that I met you at a very young age in the business, because you always told me, Joe, no matter how nice something looks, you could have gone with the wind. If you go over budget, your bosses are going to be mad and you're going to get fired.
Right.
So you make it look the best you can and tell your story with the budget that you had. If you have extra time, you make it look nicer, but always tell your story first and always make sure you're efficient. So efficiency, Joe, and I wish I could tell you I saw it a lot more in this business. I just don't. Like, people are blown away sometimes with how fast I am and how efficient I can be on things because they just weren't trained that way. But, you know, I move very fast. So when I work by myself, you know, I move around a lot of things. I go, you know, it's hard for me to turn back and explain to somebody sometimes what I'm doing because sometimes you just have to go. But it's a very different thing when you're working alone as a Preditor or when you're working with a producer behind you. You have to respect their vision. And if they tell you something that you don't agree with, you do it. And if you both look at it and you don't like it, you discuss it. And that could work two ways, Joe, because the only way you learn new things is by working with other people. Because I could be so set on my ways that, in this Yankee tease, I'm going to do a lot of motion effects and I'm going to do that. But unless you see something on TV that ESPN or somebody else tells you an idea, you really don't know it until you try it. So I always look forward to working with new people and hearing their ideas.
Right. And you're very good at that. And you've also just, again, answered my next two questions, but I'm going to continue to ask them. So first off, for those of you, people who aren't in television or who don't work with editors in a visual environment, what Joe is pointing to behind him is someone like myself, who we bring a story or we bring a concept and we say, okay, let's now make it come to life. And Joe's that front lines guy. People from the recording industry, music recording, it's the engineer who's sitting there and the producer's next to him and the band's over here. That's all similar. So, Joe, which one of those things? No, I'm not going to ask because you just answered it. How do you work with a producer's vision when a project's brought to you that you have a passion and a vision for, and the producer goes, Burp? How do you try to pull him back in, or do you just let the collaborative process work?
you have to see it through, because if you have a producer, it depends how high up the producer is. A lot of the producers here are younger than me and haven't been in the business as long, and they take my word for a lot of things. But if they have something that's really kick ass, and I think we could do it, even though I know maybe the time constraints might not work, you have to at least try. But in the back of your pocket, you have to know, okay, if this goes bad, I need a bailout here. I need to make sure I get it done, because in the end, Joe, everything that goes on every night is all my work, and it's all going to come down to me. So nothing that leaves my edit room. If there's a flash frame, if there's something that's cut out, if you're one frame under than you should be, it all comes down on me. Because the producer can easily say, "Well, I told the editor this." So, and believe me, I do nightly things for 20 years. So sometimes you wish you had more time to work on stuff. Sometimes you have a deadline of 5 o'clock if it's going to air at 6. You have to send it upstairs. It's always helpful to have a second eye, and it's always helpful to have somebody come over you and make the political choices, like which players you can use, which players you can't. But in the end, yeah, man, you have to respect somebody else's vision, because you don't know how hard they worked on it. So you don't want to just shoot something down immediately without working on it first.
Yeah, I got extremely lucky when I crossed over from music production and I moved into television. Very rare does anybody get as lucky as I did. I was working in an environment that was pretty freeform. They let me get away with a lot of things that maybe I shouldn't have been, because I was so green. But most importantly, I had an incredible editors. Joe Barron, who was a seasoned veteran, who's been around forever, and a tremendous editor, producer, but they didn't call them producers. Mm-hmm. But he had tremendous vision, and he was able to pull a story together even from random pieces. And Ron Humer, who was another young but very talented out-of-the-box editor. So working with them in a collaborative environment, I have my vision. As a producer, I knew what story, because I had gone out and done the interview, and I knew what I wanted to pull together. But I never pull the reins in on somebody else. Even you and I work together on a lot of stuff still to this day. Yeah. And I won't pull the reins in. I know how talented you are, and I know your creativity is going to bring something that I'm probably not going to see, because eventually we all get, as much as we try not to, we do get that tunnel vision. Mm-hmm. And letting somebody free and then looking at it and evaluating it for your purposes. And you said all these words, so that's why you are who you are, and that's why you're able to sustain your career the way you have. Mm-hmm. A lot of people get set in their ways and end up outside working at Costco.
Oh yeah, like even now. Now I'm an avid editor, and I remember years ago it was the rise of Final Cut Pro, and a lot of places were changing over because of the cost. But a lot of places stuck to Avid. In the end, Avid ended up winning. But now we're seeing the rise of Adobe Premiere. During the pandemic a couple of years ago, I was editing 2 shows a week from my basement on Adobe Premiere, and it was going straight up and getting to the satellite and airing. So what I thought is, okay, if this is the way a lot of businesses are going to go, I better learn and get faster on Adobe Premiere. So that's what you're doing. You're constantly learning, and you're finding out that Adobe Premiere could save you a lot of money, and it could do a lot of things that Avid can't do in a much quicker turnaround. Right. And so a lot of businesses are using that. A lot of freelance jobs are using Adobe Premiere now. So you can either be stubborn, like the people that used to be in a tape-to-tape room at editing. Go, I'm not going to learn that. I'm not learning Avid. I'm a tape-to-tape editor. Well, that went away, right, Joe? Gave it a couple of years. That went away. So now it's like you can't be dead set on editing. So what I mean to show my kids, too, is that, I'm growing every day, even as a professional. 14 Emmys, you know what Emmy's going to be the nicest? Number 15. Because that means I'm still working.
Right. And you know what I have to just say, and I'm not diminishing any Emmys or any awards or Oscars or any of that stuff, Grammys, but I can't think of one creative instance where it's one individual's talent that makes that happen.
Right.
I've always been somewhat reluctant to accept Emmys because in my head there's a lot of people that surrounded me that made this happen, but because my name's on it as a producer, I get the show Emmy or I get this. But meanwhile, there's a lot of people behind those lines that don't get it. So unless it's a very specific technology or a very specific editor of this segment, that's an Emmy to me that is, even that, now that I said it, I said if you have a producer involved in it, then...
Right. So even when I won Best Sports Editor, everything that I'm editing on screen, I didn't shoot. So I had a shooter go out and shoot it.
Great.
So I had the graphics guy send me the graphics, So yes, I'm winning my position. But the great thing is, in all 14 of my Emmys, is I can point exactly to what I did. And you know what, Joe? There are a lot of people that their names aren't on these, and they're collecting trophies. And they had nothing to do with it. But I can point to my children and show them every one of these statues and say, I did this for this. I did that for that.
Yes.
I did it. This was my contribution
Yes.
to them. Because in the end, you can get as many statues as you want. But if you're not fulfilled in your head and you can do better, every time one of my teases airs that opens up a Yankee game or a playoff game, I get chills that it's going to go on TV.
Right.
Because the day I lose that passion, I have to move on to something else. Because nobody's going to come over afterwards. Even when I win Emmys, they don't come up to you and say, all right, you get a raise. You know what I'm saying? It's not like that.
No.
It's personal fulfillment, because a lot of time when you get lost in a big company, nobody does realize what you do because there's so many other names on it.
Right.
So, yes, it's personal fulfillment. But, man, I tell you, Joe, there's nothing like knowing that your stuff is going to air all over the country and everybody's going to watch and just be so proud of it. And that's a feeling that you get from television and from film and stuff that you can't get in a lot of work.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I guess a lot of people also don't know is that a lot of these awards come from your peers. You're voted on by your peers. It's not the masses out in the world. So when you're getting recognition from your people, from people who are in the industry, who we are all very critical.
Oh, yeah.
So when you get somebody to say, wow, you are very good at this, and this is great, that has a different weight to it than if the masses who really aren't looking at it as nuanced as we look at things.
Right. Because I could show a video of my daughter walking around for 10 minutes, put it on TV, and my mother said, oh, that's a masterpiece. That'll win an Emmy. Those are the masses. They're not going to realize how much went into it. Like my mother, my whole family, nobody even watches. I have a feature on every night. So they don't even realize what goes into this stuff. But they're going to love everything I do because it's me.
Right.
So, you're more critical of yourself. And sometimes I really do get mad at myself, like even at the Emmy Awards. When they announce winners, they show everybody that loses going like this. I curse out loud. What's there to be happy about? I lost. I lost. But at the same time, yes, it's an honor to be, considered and everything like that. And I'm joking around. The Emmys are great. But like I said, I'm a very lucky man like you. I've had a lot of good opportunities. Like even with the Giants, I came in very raw with the Giants. But Joe, since I was an intern working for you, it took you a couple of weeks. That's it. It took you a couple of weeks. And I remember when I actually made my bones with you. We were a couple of weeks with it real quick. And we were doing a live show at Chelsea Piers live show. Anyway, we had these crowds come in for our show. And we were waiting on Howard Cross to come in. He was our guest, our Giants guest. And we had 2 buses full of school kids that were in our audience that night. And Howard was coming from Giant Stadium into the city. And he was running behind. And these kids are getting restless. And Joe, knowing me for about 2 weeks, hands me the mic and goes, go take care of this. And I went outside, right? And I'm Italian, so it came easy. And I talked for half an hour. I talked wrestling. I talked jokes. Talked Sopranos, right? And then, and then Howard got there and everybody was good. And you just looked at me and go, and I knew it in your head. You're going, it's nice just to tell somebody, go do something without hearing, but, you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
That's the most trust you can have in somebody. Am I right or wrong with that story? Though?
Yeah, and it's probably one of my assets that's probably survived, allowed me to survive as long as I have, is I have a good intuition about people. I can meet somebody pretty quickly, size them up, and say who can and who can't, where they're going to fit in, where they're not going to fit in. It definitely comes from the music world when you meet somebody and go, yeah, you shouldn't be playing guitar, you should be playing keyboard, or you should be playing drums because you can't do this, but you can do that. So you assess that quickly.
Yeah.
And when I moved over into broadcast.
Joe, in that instance, that had nothing to do with production.
No.
That just had seeing me as an individual.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It was
Yeah.
you were a personable person, you were funny, you were good, and anybody else I pointed to that was on the production crew would have frozen their tracks and said no. And you just went, okay, took the mic, went out, and basically in television, especially on like a sitcom environment, episodic sitcom, that's the warm up. That's the guy who goes out and gets the audience ready to go and warmed up and laughing and feeling good, and then then we start shooting the show.
Yeah, yeah.
You
And
went
then it
out and
became a
warmed up
weekly
the
thing.
audience.
And then it
Excuse
became a
me?
weekly thing. I was doing giveaways. I was like Bob Barker out there.
Yeah, it did. It became the warm up act for the
Yeah.
show. It was hysterical.
I got
Yeah,
great
that was good. You have a great. I mean, you have a great diversity. You could have easily been on camera. If this whole thing, this whole editor thing didn't work out for you, you could have gone left and gone to be on camera. You have a great rapport with your audience at that point.
Oh, Joe, you don't remember? I was on camera. I was Browser the robot for 2 episodes. When Jay Glazer
Oh.
couldn't show up.
I have no way to access those tapes,
Uh-huh.
and it would take forever to try to explain what
No.
that was.
No.
But
Just so
yeah,
everybody knows,
you
you can't explain it.
again,
Right?
it's ridiculous that we
Yeah.
did stuff like that and that we got
Yeah.
away with it and we were able, but that gave us that ability to expand, to grow, and very few places that are real, that are on air, that don't give you my MTV experiences, Viacom. Those were kind of sort of like that, but nowhere near the small group of people that we had and the expansiveness of what we were able to do. I don't want to say get away with, but we were able to try things.
Yeah.
And if something worked, it worked.
Yeah.
And then we hung with it. So as you went through, you said you started out, what you did, you started out interning, kind of what is called today as a PA. Then you became an associate producer with me.
Yeah.
And then you moved to become the producer.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you learned editing. What was driving you that whole time to learn new skills, to evolve yourself? Because you kept making, your path was like this.
Yep. And you know what? I'm kind of like Forrest Gump. I was a lucky SOB. It's not like, Joe, my jobs were the New York Giants, which I loved as a kid. Then I moved on to the WWE, which is a whole different story. I mean, I never went home, but I loved all of it. I went from, helping on a production crew to helping in an edit room to going to get lunch for my favorite wrestlers. And I never minded anything. I loved it. I never went home. And, I was very fortunate there. And then I worked at the NBA. And then I get a job with the Yankees. So it's not like I'm working on pickleball.
Right.
I've got a lot of great opportunities. So that's kind of what moved me along is the interest level. And I'm like, I was very fortunate for all these opportunities, Joe. But it's one thing to be given something, and you got to seize it, man. You got to seize it where your bosses don't want you leaving. They don't want you going somewhere else. Sometimes they have to, in the instance with the Giants. I needed full-time work. It was seasonal work, the NBA. And, you love that when you make an impression in a place where later on in your career, somebody goes, hey, Joe Ferro from the Giants told me I can call you up. I got a gig for you.
Right.
The word of mouth, Joe. Because when you make an impression on somebody, they know, oh, I got a good avid editor, in my head. So yeah, I mean, it really helped me learning at a young age, all the aspects of the business.
And you're saying something. You're saying something that's not. It's not really accurate. You're saying you were given opportunities. You weren't given anything. You chased and created those opportunities, and that's another thing that a lot of people miss. They keep waiting for. In the music world, we used to say, you're a garage band or a basement band, and you keep waiting for the A&R guy to drive down your street and go, hey, I'm going to sign them. That's not how it works. You got to go chase it. You got to chase it. You got to get denied. You got to chase it. You got to get denied. You got to chase it. And you got to know what you want. You got to go after those big dreams.
Yeah. And then when you work for somebody like you were a supervisor, and if you did a good job, you told somebody, but you never gave them everything. You never said, okay, now you're set. Now you're on your way. You always wanted to keep them level-headed, so they're still learning. You never wanted anybody to get too far ahead of themselves, which is important now. Because I run into a lot of young people, they log a game and then they want a position the next day. Oh, you know, I did 3 days of logging, so I should have a full-time job at Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going, whatever happened to internships?
Yeah.
You know, I started working for free, and I loved it. My first day at Giants training camp, I loved being up there. I didn't give a you know what if I was not making any money first.
Yeah.
You have to love it. So you really have to have a passion for what you're doing. And luckily, I found my passion, given an opportunity, and then I said to myself, man, I am never letting this go.
Yeah, no, and you've done an incredible job. Last question, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but it is something a lot of us run up against at some point in our careers, because our careers start overwhelming our lives.
Yeah.
But there's a point at which you have to balance the two worlds. You need a life. You can't live for your gig. You have to live. You need a life because that's your fallback.
Mm-hmm.
How are you able to balance it? And I know that if there's television on a holiday, somebody's working.
Yeah.
If there's a game on and, when you're supposed to, other people are on vacation, somebody's working.
Yeah.
So how have you been able to find that middle ground?
In the past, working on freelance jobs, I've worked Thanksgiving, I've worked New Year's Eve, I've worked everything. With the Yes Network, I say this now, for 20 years, they've given me a living.
Yeah.
You know, I've been able to be a father and
Right.
raise my kids, and that didn't come easily. But I do know in the back of my head, sure, most days are 9 to 5, and I have a pregame show that comes on. But if I work weekends, like I used to work on the football show, the Joe Girardi show, stuff like that. But I also know in my head, you better make sure September's always crazy. Playoff run, always leave October open. Don't make any plans in March. April's opening day. The Emmy push is in September when you have to start submitting Emmys. You know, it's just stuff like that a lot of time. And I know that once the playoffs come, I'm doing a tease every day. So I'm coming in, I'm doing, I have from when that game ends to come in. And Yes is never one of those places to tell me, you better be in at this. I know that in my head. I know what time something has to be done. So I know times I have to step it up. For the most part, though, I've been very lucky. Yes has given me a job in television at a network in Connecticut, because I moved my family up to Connecticut, and I live up here, and I'm about a 20-minute commute away. And they know I'm always available. So the times that they do ask me to go over and beyond, I have no issue doing it. I have no issue because I'm a staff editor, which is very, very rare, Joe.
Right.
Back in the days, it was, very rare. So I kind of know in my head, all right, you do your best work every day, but this is when you have to step it up. My family understands, never had an issue. So as long as your family understands that, it's a big part. Because I lost 2 relationships when I worked at WWE, 2 girlfriends. Because I'd ask, what time are you coming home tonight? I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know. I got to come home when the work is done. Luckily, I was in my 20s, though, and it was a different time. So that's a great question. I'm glad you ended on that. Because a lot of places don't provide you the opportunity that Yes did. So I'm really thankful to this place. So I'll win them 14 more Emmys if I can. I'll make them look as good as I can. I really love that they give me a lot of trust. And they basically say, take this and go with it. Michael K. sending you a VO. Turn it into the opening day tease. I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
When I don't get excited for it in my own head,
Right.
gotta walk away and open up my Italian deli, like I'm gonna do. All right, gotta go. Oh.
All right, my friend. Thank you, Joey. It's always a pleasure. You're great.
Yeah.
And we got projects that we're still working on together. He's amazing. You can actually see some of his work on Ferro City. He's part of our family. So cool. Joey, I got to run. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a busy man, but I appreciate you.
Always a pleasure, Joe. Take care.
All right. Peace.